well and operating inside of South Africa, even if there was very little of organizational presence still remaining.
You once mentioned that Mbeki was quite disrespectful to Mandela. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, let me go back behind that as well. You see, part of the debates that began to happen in Lusaka in the late 1970s, basically, and 80s, was a growing difference on strategic perspective. And I think there were those like Mbeki, who at that stage was young and brilliant, and remains, not so young, but I think a powerful intellectual still today. Those who basically became increasingly skeptical about socialism, for instance. So Mbeki was a senior leader in the South African Communist Party until the unbanning of the Communist Party in 1990, and then left the Communist Party, along with several others. And I think there was a growing skepticism about the Communist Party, but also, I think, an approach to the democratic transition that needed to happen in South Africa that was rather managerial, rather technicist, and rather elite. It was about elite pacting, essentially, and producing a different kind of ANC, which would now become just an election party, basically, and that it would, engage with the people, but electorally, like a typical, I suppose I would say, bourgeois political party. And that was the sharp difference with someone like Chris Hani, who always felt that that democratization, a progressive constitution, were just the beginnings of a profound transition that would need to have to happen in South Africa, and that couldn't happen just top down through state power. It would also require the ongoing mobilization of working people, of the rural poor, the landless, and so on. So I think that. I don't think that Mbeki was particularly disrespectful of Mandela, but when Mandela was critical of, after Mandela had ceased to be president of the ANC and of the country, raised some critical concerns about Mbeki, including the AIDS, typically Mbeki's position on HIV/AIDS. Mbeki saw this as very threatening, and I think arranged for what I thought was an extremely unhappy process in which Mandela came to the National Executive Committee, and there was a kind of orchestrated campaign against Mandela, which was, for someone of his age and stature and importance, and on the wrong issue, which was to so that Mbeki surrounded himself with a group of people who I think became increasingly problematic.
Speaking of factions and allegiances, what can you tell us about the alleged Premier League?
Well, I want to be careful because I think we need to, in our own perspectives as the Communist Party, not ourselves become sectarian or over-personalized. But I think that one of the deep concerns that we have as a Communist Party in the present is the fact that in politics and in a broad political formation, a broad church, which the ANC correctly is, clearly you're going to get different schools of thought and different perspectives and so on, and that's fine. And I think it's always been a great strength of the ANC that it has been this very broad, inclusive movement. A great strength. I mean, beginning from its very origins back in 1912, when it said, that one of the reasons why black people have been defeated by colonialism is that they've been divided ethnically and in groups and so on. And the ANC saw its job as black people in South Africa in a common project. And so that was in many ways quite a modern perspective. It was saying we mustn't be in denial that we're Xhosa speakers or or Zulu speakers or whatever. So we mustn't drop those identities, but we must also use our political organization and struggle to forge a new identity, a South African and also non-racial identity. But what we're seeing in the present is, I'm afraid, differences based not on ideological differences. I talked about some back in the 1980s or 1990s when there were differences around how much emphasis to put on popular mobilization and so on. Increasingly, the differences are related around positions, money, politics, and factions without ideologies, but supporting one personality or another. So I don't want to point fingers specifically at a so-called Premier League or whatever, but more to observe that it's hugely. Let us have robust debate between the ANC and other political formations, including the Communist Party, but also inside of the ANC, great strength of the ANC. But let it be political debate, and let us then work out what our differences are and find a common program. But unfortunately, too much of it currently is premised on pursuing tenders, pursuing positions in order to be able to advance material interests and personal interests. That's a problem.
However, do you believe that there is an active Premier League?
Well, I think I've not used that word particularly, but that word has been used. And yes, I think that factions are sometimes based around strong men, typically men, in provinces, who command voting blocks, basically, and who use those voting blocks to advance particular perspectives in national conferences and so on the ANC. And I think that that's problematic. To repeat the point, we need to explore. It's natural that there are different perspectives in politics. Politics is inherently about policies and policy choices, and they're not easy in a difficult situation. But where they become about positioning, about money, about tenders and so on, that's problematic.
Do you think that the Premier League has the ability to influence the upcoming elections?
Are we talking about local government elections? Yeah, when you say, do they have influence?
Well, the national elections.
No, sure. You see, I think those that are referring to a Premier League and to pointing fingers at particular directions, essentially those battles are about internal ANC battles, positioning who gets onto lists, who gets elected as a branch chairperson, as a provincial chairperson, a district or regional secretary, and so forth. And that's understandable. It occurs in political parties, but to really just underline the point, when it's about material interests and not about, in an honest way, pursuing a political debate, we have problems. And I think that those problems have deepened in the recent past. And I think that, we've seen factional groupings and voting blocks having a strong influence, one, on the list process and deciding who are ANC candidates, not just in the upcoming local government elections, but in future provincial and past national and provincial elections, as well as internal ANC democratic processes.
The word on the street is that Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma might be running for presidency. Now, do you think this would be fair, considering that normally it is the deputy president that would be considered next in line?
Well, certainly as the South African Communist Party, we've been very careful to say that we must not get tangled up in the contests, internal ANC contests as to who becomes a president or not. I think that, in my view, that's one of the mistakes that historically COSATU has made. It's pronounced itself as COSATU, as being in favor of this or that candidate in an ANC election process. And I think certainly as the South African Communist Party, we would be very annoyed if ANC officials said they want this or that personality to emerge as the General Secretary or the Deputy General Secretary of the Communist Party. We need to safeguard the independence of our formations. But of course, as SACP members, including myself, we are also ANC members, and we are free and must obviously participate actively to the best of our ability in internal ANC election processes. But since I'm speaking on this program essentially as an SACP leader, and since in any case the ANC has said it's far too soon now to talk about personalities and so on, the National Conference of the ANC is only in December of 2017. I will also refrain. But let me say that anyone is free to contest, should be free to contest the presidential elections of the ANC, any member in good standing and so forth. And therefore, I think it would be wrong to disqualify someone from doing that. Our great hope as the SACP, and it was something that we raised in a recent bilateral with the senior officials of the ANC, is that the ANC must take greater responsibility itself for ensuring that the transition moment between different presidents. There's no reason why, in principle, constitutional reason why President Zuma can't stand again in December 2017. We understand that he's indicated that that's not his intention. But the ANC leadership collective must not itself become divided in the process and must help to facilitate an honest process in which we weigh up, as the ANC, the pros and cons of different candidates, so that it's not left to a kind of factional shootout at conference. I mean, that's what happened at the Polokwane conference. And I think that because the matter was left to factional battles rather than into a collectively guided. I'm not saying that the top six in the ANC should tell the rest of the ANC how to vote. Obviously, it's for elected branch delegates to vote one way or another. But unless they create the space, and there was an important precedent which we mentioned back in 1991, which was the first legal again conference of the ANC. Thabo Mbeki and Chris Hani were contesting for the deputy presidency, and Mandela and Sisulu realized that this was going to, and Oratomba realized that this was going to cost the ANC terribly, that contest, because both were popular. I think Chris Hani was more popular, but both were popular and both belonged to the same generation. And so they were advised by the senior leadership, don't contest. Let Walter Sisulu stand in as a transitional deputy president of the ANC in order to ensure that we don't launch the ANC in 1991 in a way in which there's this a huge battle that divides the organization. It's the unity of the organization around principal programs that are most important, and not which individual or collective of individuals are running it. And I think certainly that's the Communist Party perspective on the ANC succession issues, and I think it's a correct one. It's also my personal view.
So do you think that Blade Nzimande will be supporting Ramaphosa in the upcoming elections?
No, because I think that I don't know how he will vote as an ANC member and a member of the National Executive Committee of the member, but as the General Secretary of the Communist Party, we are telling ourselves, and we're committed to not pronouncing in favor of one or another candidate. What we want to see is a good collective leadership emerging and re-emerging from future ANC internal electoral processes. But we know that we only muddy the waters. We don't actually help the process if we come in independently as the Communist Party and say these are our favorite candidates. As I say, we don't want the ANC to do the same inside of the Communist Party. So Blade Nzimande will definitely, whatever his personal preferences might be, whatever my personal preferences might be, will not be pronouncing. And if he does, then he will be breaking with the discipline of the South African Communist Party, which he won't.
Within, given recent events with the SACP in regards to the ANC, do you think that the SACP is moving away from its support for Zuma?
No, because we support President Zuma as the elected president both of our country and of the ANC. And we really don't want to. It's very important not to one of the dangers of politics in Africa and politics in South Africa, and particularly the positive but the also downside legacy of the Madiba presidency, is that we need to move away from either idolizing or demonizing presidents. Imagining that they're the solution to everything, or that they are the reason for all problems going wrong. So President Zuma, as part of an ANC and government collective, enjoys our support. That's not to say that we might not be critical of President Zuma, of Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa, but not on personal grounds or factional grounds, we hope, but on grounds that something that they've said or done we disagree with. But we will do so in a principled way and not to point score or to favour this personality against that one.
Now, the recent developments of question over the KZN leadership have been quite worrisome. What can you tell us about that?
Okay, well, obviously, again, we, as the Communist Party, we are very concerned about a province that had been very unified at an ANC level, a province that initially, after the 1994 elections and so on, hadn't actually won provincial elections. And I think through excellent work, which involved also strong alliance unity within KwaZulu-Natal, the ANC succeeded in becoming overwhelmingly the majority party in the province, and contributed also then, I think, very effectively into positive outcomes within the broader ANC. I mean, in the last national elections, it was KZN which made up for losses of electoral support in many of the other provinces. So we're very concerned that the signs are now that the KZN ANC is quite divided, and that there are tensions also between alliance partners, including the ANC and the South African Communist Party. And that's extremely worrying. And that's why, again, as the Communist Party and the Communist Party in KwaZulu-Natal, we're very committed to ensuring that we don't throw away the huge asset of ANC unity based on principled politics.
Why is the SACP so opposed to the Hawks investigation over the alleged rogue unit?
We're not opposed to the investigation. We believe that that if anyone in government, regardless of their track record in the struggle and so forth, and certainly some of those people that are being targeted by who are formerly from the South African Revenue Service, have I've served with some of them, and they've been outstanding revolutionaries in the past. So but that, just because I've been to jail doesn't mean to say that I shouldn't be investigated if I'm responsible for doing bad things. But we are, frankly, very concerned about the nature of the investigation. We're not persuaded. We might not have sight of all of the information and all of the facts. Very persuaded that there's not substance in this particular investigation. And what adds salt to the wounds is that the Hawks the Hawks are now led by someone who was a security policeman in the apartheid past. Yes, indeed. Who's now in Klameza, who's now General in Klameza, who's investigating comrades that we know very well. And as I say, if they've done bad things, they must go to jail or suffer the consequences. But we must be very, very careful of not using the security, intelligence, and prosecutorial institutions for factional purposes. And we're very concerned that this might be a case of that.
Yet with ANC Secretary General Gwede Mantashe supporting the Finance Minister Gordon in his accusations against SARS Commissioner Tom Moyane and the Minister of Police Nathi Nhleko, surely this points to obvious divisions within the ANC?
Well, yes, there are concerns, and it does point to concerns. I think it's correct that the ANC raises concerns as the ruling party with what any of us might be doing in government. So, as I understood, the concerns that the Secretary General of the ANC, Gwede Mantashe, has raised in regard to this particular investigation, and particularly allegations denied, then reaffirmed, then denied again, that the Minister of Finance, Pravin Gordhan himself, is under investigation. I think that the ANC was absolutely right to say that this is hugely problematic, and it's destabilizing, and it's, again, Pravin Gordhan, if he's done anything serious, then he must be investigated. But if he's not, then it's extremely reckless at a time when ratings agencies are looking at us very carefully, foreign investors are looking at us very carefully, and at a time when there's a lot of economic uncertainty in our country, to be playing games which appear to be quite factional, to be quite honest.
Some would say that the scandal is a sign of greater factionalism to come. Is that accurate?
Well, let's hope not. I mean, let's hope that we really address the problems of factionalism. And as I said, I don't have a problem with different political streams of thought. But where you get contests internal to the ANC or internal to government itself, which appear to be about private interests, what we've described as corporate capture of parts of the state, or the danger of that, then I think we should be extremely worried. And unless we put a cap on that, unless we deal decisively with those issues, then indeed the concern that the factionalism might worsen is a real possibility. But I'm confident that government, the ANC-led government, and the ANC and its alliance are quite capable of addressing these issues.
That was the Jeremy Cronin interview right there.